The vibes have been overwhelmingly positive and celebratory since the DeMar DeRozan edition here on this podcast, but the Kings still have a glaring weakness. They entered the summer with it, and to this point have yet to address it. And we'll dive into what that is right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, sports just aren't really sporting the way that we want it to. Even with the Olympics going on, the sports calendar just maybe isn't hitting right now. But the good news is all summer long, FanDuel is offering daily bonuses and boosts to help you enjoy this summer time. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. Coming into this offseason, there were a lot of questions about this Sacramento Kings team. One of the major questions had to do, of course, with Malik Monk. Well, that question has been answered. Another question surrounding the Sacramento Kings. Would they go out and make a big move, try and add a big name, make a big addition to get this team back in the postseason? We have an answer to that question. It came in the form of six-time All-Star DeMar DeRozan. But something that I was very consistent, a clear need that this Kings team I felt had to address this offseason that they really haven't to this point. And it's something that I've seen a lot of you bring up and call out since the DeMar DeRozan edition, even though I've been very excited and very positive about that move. It's the lack of depth, particularly at the forward position. If we're talking that 3-4 spot, we're talking guys that are 6'8", 6'9", 6'10". The Sacramento Kings have yet to address that. In fact, in that sense, you could even say they might have gotten slightly weaker by trading Harrison Barnes away as part of the sign-in trade that brought DeMar DeRozan, who is a 6'6" forward, not a 6'9", 6'10" guy like Barnes is, to Sacramento. Now, measurements, height, is a big deal in the NBA. Of course, it's a big deal in basketball, period, right? These are tall human beings. If you've ever had the privilege of being able to stand around these guys or sit courtside or sit close to the court, you get a full scope of how big and how tall these dudes really are. That being said, you can be plenty talented and have plenty of success in the NBA without being that tall. In the Kings' history, I can think of Spud Webb and Isaiah Thomas as names that come to mind, right? So height isn't everything in the NBA. But the Kings particularly struggled against teams like the New Orleans Pelicans, who had a wealth of height at the wing and at the forward position that Sacramento couldn't necessarily match up with. Lo and behold, that problem still exists. So let's talk about it. Let's dive into, is it still that bad? Is Sacramento going into next offseason, next season, should I say, having made clear upgrades, but because they still lack in that area, maybe they'll experience the same issues that they had last year. Maybe when they meet the New Orleans Pelicans again, things will go badly. God, I sure hope not. I don't know if I can sit through another season of the Kings getting beaten by the Pelicans as badly as they did 6 times last season. But really, Jalen McDaniels is the only addition, and he's like 6'8". That's like the only addition in that height category that the Kings have made this offseason. They lost Harrison Barnes, and just recently, they lost Kessler Edwards to the Dallas Mavericks. He signed a 2-way deal with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, are we mourning the loss of Kessler Edwards? No, we're not. And I appreciate Kessler for the work that he put in here in Sacramento. I think the one thing that I can say about Kessler, and unfortunately it's a negative thing, but I think it speaks to who Kessler is as a player. Mike Brown is a defensive-minded coach. Mike Brown highly values, the skill set that Kessler Edwards is known for. He had the length. He had the athleticism. He had the versatility on the defensive end to make a difference for this Kings squad. Why couldn't he see the floor other than short stretches at the end of quarters last season? Because offensively, there was nothing there. And I think that's going to speak to an overall bigger topic, which we're going to touch on in this podcast today as well. Looking at the roster moves that the Sacramento Kings have made this offseason, I think it's clear they're pointing in a clear direction. They're looking to get back to something. I'll talk about that in the next segment. We also have to talk about the new addition that the Sacramento Kings made, Orlando Robinson. They signed a big man to a 1-year deal. We'll talk about that at the end of the podcast too. But going back to the glaring weakness of lack of size at that wing/forward spot, other than Keegan Murray, Jalen McDaniels was really the only addition that the Kings made. And Jalen McDaniels is a guy that I'm not exactly positive is going to even make the team. As of right now, he doesn't really have fear of losing his spot because as of right now, the Kings haven't really signed guys yet that are threatening his spot in training camp, although that could still come in the time between now and training camp beginning. Now, what the Kings did do is they did get bigger and I think stronger, physically stronger and talent-wise stronger, at the guard spot. I mean, Malik Monk coming back doesn't really address that, but Malik Monk coming back was, of course, a huge deal. But they draft Devin Carter, right, who provides physicality, athleticism, hustle, size on the defensive end. I mean, he's 6'2", so we're not talking about a lot of size, although he has the wingspan, he has the rebounding ability. To some extent, DeMar DeRozan, right? They got another 6'6" guard in here, but DeMar, we know, is more offensively gifted. And then Jared McLaughlin, who they added, who is really a depth guy who's going to fill the role of, I think, backup point guard while Devin Carter heals from his shoulder surgery. And then after that, acclimates himself to the NBA, right? So the Kings got bigger at that spot, at the guard spot, maybe stronger at the guard spot as well for the physical defense that they want to play, but they still have this gaping hole or this lack of size with that wing/forward spot. So again, I go back to the question, right? Are the Kings just going to have the same issues next season? There probably should be some expectation that will be the case. Now, that does not mean that the Kings are going to be a worse basketball team or the same basketball team. The additions that they made in other areas, I think, are significant enough for them to improve. But I think they are going to face the same issue. I think they are still going to struggle with teams like New Orleans that bolster a lot of that depth. I think that the depth at that wing and forwards position. I think they're also still going to struggle with their perimeter defense. And I'm not just talking about their perimeter on-ball defense, because the addition of Devin Carter helps with that. The Kings, I think, are fine for the most part with their on-ball defense. To me, it's with the type of defense that they like to play, with a lot of heavy switching and a lot of help defense and a lot of scrambling. I think the Kings are still going to be vulnerable, giving up kick-out three-pointers, and are still going to lack enough size to close out and truly contest the NBA quality shooters that they will face every single night. So I do expect that the Kings' perimeter defense, their three-point shooting percentage, or should I say their opponent three-point shooting percentage, I still expect to be the bottom half of the league. Hopefully it's not at the very bottom of the league like it was for much of last season, but this team still has that weakness that they have to address, or that they have to find a way with the roster that they have to overcome. Now, the Kings, after the signing of Orlando Robinson, do technically have one roster spot left. There's 15 spots, a total of 18 if you're counting the three-way guys. Well, the two-way guys. We know who the two-way guys are. So you have your two-way spots all locked up and 14 of your 15 spots locked up. You got one spot left. So just scrolling through and looking at available free agents that are still out there, the Sacramento Kings don't necessarily have that much money or that much space, but they could probably afford a vet minimum contract. And you've got two veteran forward/wings out there that at the very least give you depth as well as leadership. Two guys that come to mind. Robert Covington, a 6'7" veteran wing who is played last season with the Philadelphia 76ers. The other one, Jay Crowder, 6'6" veteran wing who played for the Milwaukee Bucks. These are two guys that I would have been thrilled to be on the Sacramento Kings 4 or 5 years ago. Absolutely thrilled. Now, I'm realistic of what you're getting. These are guys that are probably not playing very much. These are guys that are probably filling a JaVale McGee type role from last season, except I think the expectation coming in would be that they're not playing as much as the Kings expected JaVale McGee to play when they signed him around this time last year, heading into training camp, right? So those are two names right there, Robert Covington, Jay Crowder, names that you can use your final roster spot on and bring in that address that size, address that depth, give you another body at the very least at that position, while also giving you some veteran leadership and a veteran presence. That's a route the Sacramento Kings could go. They could also go the undrafted route, or clearly with the signing of Orlando Robinson, they're keeping their eye on what was happening in Summer League and who's potentially available on other Summer League teams. Maybe they go younger in that spot to try and find another developmental wing project to replace Kessler Edwards. The Kings have options with this roster spot to address that. I would be very surprised if they use this final roster spot on anybody but a 6'8", 6'9", at the least 6'7" wing/forward guy, because it is still an issue with this roster. But the moves that the Kings made this offseason, they tell me something. They tell me something about where this team is trying to get back to in the direction that they've chosen. And I'll touch base on that. I'll dive into that more when we come back. Before that, though, like I said at the top of the show, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports, maybe a little bit too much. We're addicted, but we're not complaining, right? We never want them to end. And this is the part of the sports calendar that we typically struggle the most through. No disrespect to baseball. Hey, no disrespect to the Olympics. At least we're going to have Olympic basketball to be able to watch to kind of get us through these basketball-less months. So that's a bonus this summer. But us diehard NBA fans, us Sacramento Kings fans, we still have to wait quite a while for NBA basketball to return and Kings basketball to return. So sports, they're just not sporting the way that we want them to right now. The good news is, though, I can keep my sports fix going all summer long with FanDuel. All I have to do is open the app and dream up whatever bets I want to dream up anytime I'm in the mood. And FanDuel all summer long is hooking up all customers, every single one, whether you're brand new and signing up after you hear this ad read, to a FanDuel veteran who's hopefully won hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on the site. You can get daily bonuses and boosts that are specific for you, that FanDuel selects for you to keep everything fresh and fun. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So go and check out what your daily boost or bonus is. Hey, even let me know what your boost or bonus is. Reach out to me and go to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summertime. 2 seasons ago, when the Sacramento Kings finally ended their playoff drought, they were very clearly an offensive-driven team. One of the best offenses in NBA history. An offense that was feared that, to be fair, in the playoffs by the Warriors and towards the end of the season started to get figured out a little bit. Last season was dominated by a number of storylines, including the debate of sacrificing offense for defense, focusing in one area and taking focus away from another. And we saw that translate on the floor with the Sacramento Kings dropping from the league's best offense to around the middle of the pack. That can't happen with this Kings team anymore. That is one of those things that you can point to and clearly go, hey, why did the Sacramento Kings miss the playoffs? Even though they were still a good team, 46 wins. Even though they still had a chance to make it to the postseason. And I believe that had they stayed healthy, they would have made the postseason and made some noise in the postseason. Regardless, the reason why they weren't there, I think you can point more to their offense than anything else. Now, I could also flip that on the other side and say the reason why the Kings had a chance towards the end of the season when offensively they were struggling all year long and they dealt with those injuries is because of the defensive improvement. So I'm not trying to knock, diminish, or dismiss any of the defensive growth that this Kings team had last season. In fact, the Kings need more of it. They need it to continue, and that's a big question mark for this team this year. But offensively, the Kings need to get back to where they were. I've had this conversation with Damian Barling and Kenny Caraway, D'Lo and KC. This is a conversation that's happening in a lot of outlets in Sacramento right now. And this is a question that Mike Brown was asked a lot last season. Yours truly asking it probably more than anybody else. Hey, Mike, at what point are you focusing too much on one end that it's taking away from your overall strength? Mike was pretty consistent with, we're not throwing offense to the side. We're not ignoring offense, but our offense was so good, I'm okay with sacrificing a little of it to improve the defense. Well, the defense did improve. I think you sacrificed a little too much on the offensive end. I also think teams kind of figured the Kings out a little bit more offensively. They didn't catch anybody by surprise anymore. So this offseason, the Kings made some very clear improvements. The biggest one, the addition of DeMar DeRozan, who is an offensive weapon to the highest degree, right? Offense is his game. Defensively, he might give you something here or there, but DeMar DeRozan is an offensive piece. You went and returned Malik Monk, who can do some things on the defensive end, but offensively is where he shines, whether it's as a scorer or facilitating for his team. The two biggest additions that the Kings made once again this season highly impact the offensive end of the ball. I did a podcast not too long ago talking about what an NBA assistant coach told me about DeMar DeRozan and how he addresses the biggest weakness of the Sacramento Kings offense from 2 seasons ago when they were the best offense in the league. You can go and check that out and listen to that podcast or watch that podcast if you haven't heard those comments there. It'll excite you even more. But to me, whether it's Monte McNair, an agreement between Monty and Mike, which is what I hope it is. I hope the GM and the head coach are on the same page. For the most part, every move that the Sacramento Kings have made this offseason re-emphasizes getting back to where the Sacramento Kings need to be and want to be on the offensive end of the floor. Right? The biggest additions they've added or returns they've gotten this offseason have been on the offensive side of the ball. Now, does that mean defense is being thrown to the wayside once again? Absolutely not. In fact, I think Devin Carter is a perfect example, and the comments that Monte McNair made after the Devin Carter draft selection suggest that the Kings are looking for guys to give them both. They don't want one-trick ponies. They don't want a guy that's phenomenal on the offensive end and bad on defense. You might think that that's DeMar DeRozan. I disagree with you. I don't think DeMar DeRozan is bad on the defensive end. I think he's fine, average. He's going to make some mistakes, but his offense is overwhelmingly better to where you're not going to want to deal with that or not going to worry about dealing with the defensive side of the ball. But for the most part, this Kings team is trying to bolster themselves with players. They're trying to get Keon Ellis through all the play that he had in the Summer League and in the California Classic, trying to get Keon Ellis more comfortable with the ball in his hands as an offensive threat so he can be a two-way player that we know what he does on the defensive end of the floor. And offensively, he can add more than just standing on the perimeter and maybe hitting a shot when he gets it every once in a while, right? The Kings are looking for guys that can help you on both ends of the ball. And obviously, the ultimate goal is for the Sacramento Kings to be top 15 or top 10 offensively and defensively. If they're doing that, then they're probably competing for a title. That's what most title teams are, right? Maybe they're not there yet. In fact, I don't expect them to be there next offseason or next season. I'm telling you this to express to you that the Kings are not choosing one side of the ball over the other. They value both. But clearly, the difference between the team of 2 seasons ago and the team of last season, the first making the playoffs, the second one not, is the offensive drop-off. This Kings team offensively needs to get back to some semblance of what they were. This Kings team has to be minimum top 10, I would say definitely top 5 offense, if they truly want a chance of maximizing their potential next season. And we're talking about a team that not just makes the playoffs, hopefully wins a playoff round, and has ambitions of going even further than that, right? They don't have to turn into the Indiana Pacers, who were fantastic last season at scoring the basketball and didn't do a dang thing on the defensive end. You don't have to model them in the deep playoff run that they made necessarily. But offensively, the Kings need to get back to where they were. And I feel like these offensive moves, these moves in general this offseason, have addressed that. They added overall scoring. They've added hustle. They've added a little bit of shooting. They still have question marks about athleticism. They definitely have a big question mark about rim protection and size. And to be determined, perimeter defense. Really, Devin Carter, right? Devin Carter is the addition that the Kings made that probably is the biggest defensive addition of this offseason. I should say biggest defensive addition from someone that we expect to actually have a prominent role on this Kings roster going forward. This team is trying to get back. At least I believe the moves don't make sense. This offseason doesn't make sense unless the Sacramento Kings are not just prioritizing getting better, but prioritizing getting better by getting this offense back to what it was and maybe even trying to improve upon the consistency of that successful offense to where, like we've talked about, when teams adjust and try and take away the actions offensively that the Kings want to run, now they have Fox and DeRozan and Malik Monk, and maybe eventually Keegan Murray, who can all go out and get them a bucket when they need one at that time. Not to mention Domantas Sabonis stepping up every once in a while, or Kevin Huerter hitting a big shot off the bench, or Trey Lyles spacing the floor off the bench, right? Offensively, this Kings team needs to get back to where they were, and the moves this offseason suggest that that is a priority and that is a focus for them. The defense, there's a big question mark, because we would love to see the Kings defense play the same way all season long that they did to end last season. 100%. They would love to get back to that and even try and build upon that. The problem is so much of that defense, like Mike Brown and De'Aaron Fox and others have admitted, so much of that defense relied on the officiating and relied on officials allowing more physicality and calling less fouls, period. Hopefully the league is going in that direction because these high-scoring games and the amount of free throws were getting ridiculous. If that's the case, I like the Kings' chances to be a solid defensive team all season long. But if we start next season and the ticky-tack whistles are back, Sacramento's defense is probably going to regress again. Now they've made the offensive additions to hopefully not just make up for that, but to be able to kind of push that aside or brush that under the rug or be so good that we're not as worried about the defense as we were going into last season. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Whatever tickets you're buying, whether it's for a sporting event, like a Kings game going forward, or a concert, whether it's a massive stadium concert at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, or a smaller concert of like Ace of Spades here in Sacramento, or I don't know, maybe a concert that comes through the Golden One Center. Or maybe you're going to a theatrical production if you like a Broadway show or a musical. Maybe you're going to your local comedy club to see one of your favorite comedians come through town. Whatever event you are going to, you need to be getting your tickets on Game Time because they have the best prices you are going to find. And what's even better is the deals get better and the savings get better the closer you get to the event. I'm talking 60% is what you could save on buying tickets last minute. They have unbelievable deals you're not going to find anywhere else. They have the Game Time guarantee. They will credit you 110% of the difference if you find better or the same tickets or similar tickets in the same row, same section for a better price. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They have Game Time ticket coverage that is better than anybody else. So they recognize, hey, their deals are you making decisions last minute. Sometimes things come up. Maybe you buy tickets and suddenly you can't go because of some unforeseen circumstance. Game Time is going to treat you better and more fair than any other ticket marketplace out there because they care about you and they don't want to screw you over. Plus, they have their all-in pricing that you can turn on, which takes all of the guesswork and all of the hidden fees out of buying your tickets, right? It will show you exactly what your price is when you select your seats, so you don't have to be hit with $15, $20, $25+ in hidden fees at checkout that make those reasonable tickets now a little more unreasonable. Game Time gets rid of all of that. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Yeah, Game Time's already given you cheap tickets. Now they're giving you $20 off those cheap tickets. Again, you use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the Sacramento Kings made a move fairly recently. They signed big man Orlando Robinson to a 1-year deal. Orlando Robinson spent 2 years as part of the Miami Heat organization. Actually, we'll backtrack before that. Orlando Robinson played for Fresno State, so a California boy. to be fair, he was Southern California, but still a California guy who's now coming back to Cali. In his 67 games with the Miami Heat, playing for Eric Spoelstra, he averaged 3 points, 3 rebounds, shot 51% from the field, 38% from the three-point line, and 73% from the free throw line. So solid career numbers in the limited time that he played. 68 games over 2 seasons is nothing to roll your eyes at, especially for a Miami Heat team that 2 years ago was in the NBA Finals and is based on Heat culture, right? If you're playing for Eric Spoelstra, if you're playing for the Miami Heat, you're a good player, right? The Heat don't just play scrubs. They don't just play guys that are there to be placeholders. Orlando Robinson was not that. In addition to that, he spent some time in the G League, but not a lot of time. Here's why. Last season, in 9 games in the G League, he averaged 24 points, 11 rebounds, you could round it up to 12, 1 steal, and 2 blocks in 9 games in the G League. What does that tell you? That's an NBA player. Players who go to the G League for a short period of time and dominate the way that Orlando Robinson did, then get called right back up to the main squad, that's because they're an NBA caliber player. This is not a 4th two-way player that the Kings are using a main roster spot on. This is a guy who's an NBA caliber center. On top of that, he played for the Houston Rockets Summer League team, and that's what drew Sacramento's attention, where this summer he averaged 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 1 steal in 23 minutes per game with the Houston Rockets Summer League team. So Orlando Robinson, let's be realistic. Is he a game changer for the Sacramento Kings? No. No, he's not. But he's a really solid, cheap depth piece for this Kings team to use the roster spot on. Now, here's the question. Is he entering training camp with the expectation that now that JaVale McGee's gone, he's going to be the 3rd string center on this Kings team? Or is he entering training camp having to earn his way in? There's probably a mixture of both, but I think the expectation should be, based off of the history of the Kings, should be that I think the Kings feel that he is their 3rd string center. He is their big man that will back up Alex Len, essentially, assuming Alex Len is still the backup center going forward, which I don't know why he wouldn't be, because he's really solid and always provides valuable minutes for the Kings. So I think Orlando Robinson will be a Sacramento King. All signs point to Orlando Robinson being on the Kings main roster to start this season. Now, that does not mean that things can change. Remember, the Kings had Neemias Queta and Nerlens Noel both on non-guaranteed contracts coming into training camp, and we expected the two of them to battle it out, and he maybe even had Nerlens Noel as the favorite to end up being the 3rd string center for the Sacramento Kings. Then JaVale McGee became available. The Kings went out and got him quickly, and they didn't even give McGee and Nerlens Noel a chance, right? In fact, they let both of them go so they could have a better chance and get an opportunity elsewhere. Neemias Queta turned that into a 2-way contract with the Boston Celtics, just won a ring with them, and now is on a full contract with the Boston Celtics, so good for him. My point is, between now and the start of training camp, the Kings could easily go out and sign another center to a non-guaranteed deal. And then that center will battle it out with Orlando Robinson, and if he beats them, then the Kings have to eat the money that they paid Orlando Robinson and send him on his merry way, right? Sorry, it just didn't work out. As of right now, though, I don't think that's the case. I think the Kings see a lot of potential. If you go and watch some of his film and some of the work that he put in, both in Miami and during Summer League, you'll see, in addition to the great numbers he put up defensively, he showed some versatility, his ability to switch and step out on the perimeter and contest shots. He's not necessarily a rim protector, but because of his length and his size, he can change some shots at the rim. I think the Kings feel pretty good about Orlando Robinson being their 3rd string center going forward. Hopefully, he could become one of those great stories like Keon Ellis was for the Sacramento Kings last season. The reality is, though, if Orlando Robinson is getting major minutes for this Kings team, barring another great story, it's probably not a great thing for Sacramento. So we have to be realistic with these kind of moves and these kind of additions, and I'm not trying to crap on it. I'm just trying to be real with you. Orlando Robinson is a depth addition for the Sacramento Kings team. But there's a lot to like when you look at him. The numbers support he's an NBA caliber player, and when he's got an opportunity, more often than not, he makes an impact, and that's exactly what you're looking for out of that position. So you're looking at this Kings roster as it stands right now, right? Like I said earlier, they got one roster spot remaining. Then, of course, they have the non-guaranteed contracts that they can sign and basically invite players into training camp to potentially compete for a roster spot. They have one spot open. In my opinion, 10 spots are 100% lock guaranteed. 10 players on this roster are guaranteed to make the roster. You could probably do 11 if you're including McLaughlin. I think he is probably guaranteed to make the roster because of the Devin Carter injury. But Colby Jones, Jalen McDaniels, and maybe even Orlando Robinson, they might be those guys on the cusp, guys that have to be concerned about the non-guaranteed invitees to training camp, whether they're from the Kings Summer League team or not. These are guys that I think have to be aware that they can lose their spot. And yeah, I put Colby Jones in that mix because I like Colby. Colby wasn't very impressive to me in Summer League at all. In fact, I was pretty disappointed by Colby Jones. Offensively, I think he's stayed the same to maybe even gotten a little bit worse. He's solid rebounder, solid assist guy. At least he always seemed to make some kind of impact, which is a good thing. But as a second-year player in Summer League, when it was him and Keon Ellis, Mason Jones kind of to some extent too, and Mason did a fantastic job. But Colby Jones had an opportunity during Summer League to show his growth, and I don't think he really did that. I don't know if the Kings just guarantee him or give him a ticket right back onto this Kings team and right back onto the main roster. I think he's going to have to compete for it. He's going to have to work for it. We'll see who his competition is. Again, we don't know yet. We don't know. Maybe even he could lose his job and one of these two-way guys can get a main roster spot and then the Kings go out and get another two-way guy to add. That's possible too. A lot can happen between now and the start of the season. But I'm very interested to see what Colby Jones' position looks like going into training camp time. All right, now I want to hear from you. How concerned are you that the Sacramento Kings have not really addressed their lack of depth at that forward position, the 6'8", 6'9", 6'10 guys? How worried are you about that? How are you feeling about the Kings leaning, in my opinion, back into their offensive direction? And your thoughts on Orlando Robinson? Hit me up at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.